My name is Janet, I'm 32 years old, and I thought I knew my family better than anyone. Growing up in a tight-knit household in Ohio, family had always been everything to me. So when my younger brother Marcus announced his engagement to Sarah 3 years ago, I couldn't have been more thrilled. As his big sister and chosen maid of honor, I'd spent months helping plan what I believed would be the perfect wedding day. I had my dress pressed, my speech memorized, and my heart full of excitement. Little did I know that one simple phone call would shatter everything I believed about the people I loved most. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you've ever had a family secret completely blindside you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories. Now let me tell you about the phone call that changed everything. Marcus had always been my baby brother. Even though at 28 he towered over my 5'4" frame and had built a successful career as a software engineer. We'd grown up sharing everything from childhood secrets to adult dreams. When he met Sarah at a college reunion, I was the first person he called to tell me about this amazing woman who'd captured his heart. Sarah seemed perfect for him initially. She was smart, ambitious, working as a nurse practitioner, and seemed to genuinely care about Marcus's happiness. Their 3-year courtship had been filled with family dinners, holiday celebrations, and countless moments where I watched my brother transform into a more confident, settled version of himself. When Marcus proposed during a weekend trip to our family's lake house in northern Michigan, I cried harder than Sarah did. That property had been in our family for generations, passed down from our grandparents who'd built it as a summer retreat back in the 1950s. As maid of honor, I'd thrown myself into wedding preparations with the enthusiasm of someone planning her own celebration. I'd organized the bridal shower, helped select flowers, spent weekends driving to different venues, and even coordinated with out-of-town relatives for accommodations. My job as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized advertising firm kept me busy during weekdays, but weekends belonged to wedding planning. Aunt Beverly, our father's sister, had become the unofficial family coordinator for the event. At 64, she possessed an organizational skill that put professional wedding planners to shame. Beverly had raised 4 children of her own and had orchestrated dozens of family celebrations over the years. She was the person everyone called when they needed something done right. Her reliability was legendary in our family. If Beverly said something would happen, it happened exactly as promised. The past month had been particularly hectic at work. Our agency had landed a major client requiring extensive overtime, and I'd been pulling 12-hour days to meet deadlines. I'd missed a few family phone calls and had been communicating primarily through quick text messages. But that was temporary. Once this project wrapped up, I'd have time to focus completely on giving Marcus and Sarah the perfect wedding send-off they deserved. My bridesmaid dress hung in my closet, a beautiful sage green number that complemented my brown hair and hazel eyes. I'd written and rewritten my maid of honor speech at least a dozen times, wanting to capture exactly how proud I was of Marcus, and how welcomed Sarah had made me feel as a soon-to-be sister-in-law. The gift I'd chosen was wrapped and ready, a beautiful set of vintage crystal glasses that had belonged to our grandmother, something I knew Marcus would treasure. The call to Aunt Beverly was supposed to be routine. I dialed her number while reviewing my timeline for the next morning, my notebook open with carefully written reminders about pickup times, photographer schedules, and ceremony details. Beverly answered on the second ring with her usual warm greeting. "Hi, Aunt Beverly, it's Janet. I just wanted to confirm what time you need me at the church tomorrow morning," I said, adjusting my phone between my shoulder and ear while flipping through my notes. There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause that immediately set off alarm bells in my mind. Tomorrow? Beverly's voice carried a strange, strained quality I'd never heard before. "Honey, what are you talking about?" "The wedding," I laughed, assuming she was having a senior moment. "Marcus and Sarah's wedding. I can't wait for tomorrow. I've had everything ready for weeks." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. When Beverly finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Janet, sweetie, the wedding was last week." My pen slipped from my fingers, clattering onto my kitchen table. "What do you mean last week?" "Beverly, that's not funny. The wedding is tomorrow, Saturday the 15th. We've had this date circled on calendars for 8 months. Janet. Her voice carried a weight that made my stomach drop. The wedding was Saturday the 8th. It was beautiful. Marcus looked so handsome in his tuxedo, and Sarah's dress was absolutely stunning. The ceremony was at St. Mary's, just like we planned, and the reception was at the country club. My hands started shaking. "That's impossible. I'm the maid of honor." I have my dress, I have my speech. I've been preparing for months. Oh, honey. Aunt Beverly's voice broke slightly. I thought you knew. I thought you decided not to come because, well, because of everything that happened. What everything? Beverly, I don't understand what you're talking about. What do you mean I decided not to come? I've been planning this wedding for months. I organized the bridal shower. I helped pick out flowers. How could there be a wedding without me knowing? The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. The unreturned phone calls from family members over the past few weeks. The text messages that seemed shorter than usual. The way conversations felt slightly off when I did manage to connect with relatives. Beverly, please tell me you're confused about the dates. Please tell me you're thinking about someone else's wedding. But even as I said the words, I knew she wasn't confused. Beverly had never been confused about anything important in her entire life. She was the family's memory keeper, the one who remembered birthdays, anniversaries, and every significant date. I have photos on my phone, she said quietly. From the ceremony. From the reception. Everyone was there. Your parents, your cousins from California. Even Great Aunt Margaret came down from Canada. Send them to me. My voice came out strangled. Send me the photos right now. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with incoming images. Photo after photo of my brother's wedding filled my screen. Marcus in his black tuxedo, beaming as he lifted Sarah's veil. Sarah in a stunning white gown I'd never seen before, surrounded by bridesmaids in dresses I didn't recognize. My parents dancing together at what should have been my brother's reception. Family members I'd helped coordinate travel plans for, all dressed in their finest clothes, celebrating without me. I scrolled through dozens of pictures, searching desperately for any sign of myself, any indication that this was some elaborate mistake. But I was nowhere to be found. It was as if I'd been erased from my own brother's wedding day. My first instinct was to call Marcus directly, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I tried texting him, my fingers fumbling over the keyboard as I typed increasingly frantic messages. No response. I called my parents' house 3 times before my mother finally answered. Oh, Janet! Her voice carried the same strained quality I'd heard from Beverly. We were wondering when you'd call. Mom, what happened? How was there a wedding without me? I'm Marcus's maid of honor. I've been planning this for 8 months. Honey, we tried to reach you. We left messages. I pulled up my voicemail log, scrolling back through the past 2 weeks. There were indeed several calls from my parents, from Marcus, from other family members. But when I tried returning those calls during my busy work period, no one had answered. When I'd sent texts asking what was needed, the responses had been vague or delayed. Mom, I returned every call. I sent texts. No one told me anything had changed. Well, Sarah felt that maybe it would be better if the wedding party was smaller, more intimate. She was worried about having too many people involved in the planning. My heart pounded as the implications hit me. Are you telling me that Sarah decided I shouldn't be in Marcus's wedding, and everyone just went along with it? It wasn't like that, Janet. It was just, well, you know how Sarah can be sensitive about these things. She wanted everything to be perfect, and she was worried about, well, about conflicts. What conflicts? What are you talking about? The conversation continued in circles, with my mother offering increasingly weak explanations that made no sense. Yes, they'd tried to reach me. No, they couldn't explain why my texts went unanswered. Yes, Sarah had expressed concerns about the wedding party size. No, they couldn't explain why I wasn't told directly about being excluded. I hung up and immediately opened Facebook, Instagram, and every social media platform I could think of. The evidence was overwhelming and heartbreaking. Post after post from family members celebrating Marcus and Sarah's perfect day. Photos of the ceremony, the reception, the cake cutting, the first dance. Extended family members I'd personally invited commented on how beautiful everything looked, how happy the couple seemed. My cousin Jennifer had posted a long caption about how wonderful it was to see family come together to celebrate love. My aunt had shared photos of the flower arrangements, the same arrangements I'd helped select months earlier. Even family friends were tagged in posts, people I'd assumed I'd see at the wedding. But I was completely absent from every single post, every photo, every mention. It was as if I'd never existed in my brother's life. I called Jennifer directly, knowing she'd give me straight answers. We'd always been close, and she had no patience for family drama or politics. Janet, I was wondering why you weren't at the wedding. I kept looking for you during the ceremony. You mean you didn't know I was excluded? Excluded? What do you mean excluded? I just figured you were running late or had to work or something. But then you never showed up at all. Sarah said something about you being too busy with your job to make it. My hands clenched into fists. Jennifer, I never knew the date had changed. I thought the wedding was tomorrow. I found out an hour ago that it already happened. The silence on Jennifer's end spoke volumes. That doesn't make sense, Janet. How could you not know? Everyone's been talking about it for weeks. Everyone except me, apparently. When I called my brother's best friend Tom, who'd served as best man, the story became even clearer. Tom admitted he'd wondered where I was, but assumed there had been some family disagreement he didn't want to get involved in. He'd noticed that none of the groomsmen seemed surprised by my absence, which suggested this hadn't been a last-minute decision. Honestly, Janet, I thought maybe you and Sarah had some kind of falling out. The bridesmaids were all Sarah's friends from work and college. No one from Marcus's side of the family was in the wedding party except Marcus himself. The final piece of the puzzle came when I managed to reach my cousin David, who lived out of state and had always been brutally honest about family dynamics. Janet, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you didn't know. Sarah told everyone you decided not to participate because you were too busy with work and didn't approve of some of the wedding decisions. She said you'd been critical of her choices, and she didn't want any negative energy on her special day. My world tilted sideways. David, that's not true. None of that is true. I've supported every decision Sarah made. I've spent hundreds of hours helping plan this wedding. I know that doesn't sound like you, which is why I was surprised. But Sarah seemed really upset when she talked about it, and Marcus backed up everything she said. He told the family that you'd been putting pressure on them to change things and making Sarah uncomfortable with your suggestions. I needed to see Marcus face to face. I needed to look my brother in the eyes and understand how he could exclude me from the most important day of his life. But first, I drove to my parents' house, my anger building with every mile. I found them in their living room, wedding photos spread across the coffee table like evidence of my erasure from the family. My mother looked up when I entered, her expression guilty and defensive. Janet, honey, please don't be upset. We didn't know what else to do. You didn't know what else to do? How about picking up the phone and telling your daughter that she was being excluded from her brother's wedding? How about standing up for me when Sarah decided I was persona non grata? My father, who rarely involved himself in family conflicts, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Sarah was very upset, Janet. She felt like you were trying to take over her wedding planning. I was helping. She asked for my help. I was the maid of honor. Well, she said you were making suggestions that contradicted her vision. She felt like you were being controlling. I stared at my parents in disbelief. Controlling? I helped her find a florist when the first one fell through. I organized her bridal shower. I coordinated with out-of-town relatives. When exactly was I being controlling? My mother pulled out a list, apparently prepared for this conversation. Sarah said you questioned her choice of colors. You suggested a different photographer. You recommended a different menu for the reception. I made suggestions when she asked for my opinion. That's what maids of honor do. They help with planning. She also said you made comments about the guest list being too large, my father added. I asked if she was sure about inviting her ex-boyfriend's parents. She was stressed about the cost, and I was trying to help her think through ways to reduce expenses. The conversation revealed a pattern I'd been blind to. Every helpful suggestion I'd made, every solution I'd offered to wedding planning challenges, had been reframed as criticism or control. Sarah had apparently been building a case against me for months, collecting every interaction where I tried to help and spinning it as interference. But even if she felt that way, I said, my voice breaking, why didn't anyone talk to me about it? Why didn't Marcus tell me there was a problem? Why did you all just let me be excluded without saying anything? My mother's eyes filled with tears. We were afraid if we told you, you'd try to change Sarah's mind, and she threatened to postpone the wedding indefinitely if there was any drama. So you chose to protect Sarah's feelings over your own daughter. It wasn't like that, Janet. We just wanted Marcus to be happy. And my happiness didn't factor into that equation at all? The front door opened, and Marcus walked in, still tan from what I assumed was his honeymoon. When he saw me sitting with our parents, his expression immediately became guarded. Janet, I figured you'd be here eventually. Marcus, I stood up to face my brother. Please explain to me how you got married without telling me. We did tell you. We told everyone. You were the one who decided not to participate. That's a lie, and you know it. I never decided anything. I was excluded, and everyone let it happen. Marcus sat down heavily in the armchair across from me. Janet, Sarah showed me the texts you sent her. The ones where you criticized her decisions and made her feel like nothing she chose was good enough. What texts? Marcus, I never sent Sarah any critical texts. I've been nothing but supportive. She showed me screenshots. You told her the flowers she picked were too expensive. You said the venue was too small. You questioned whether she really wanted a church ceremony. My mind raced, trying to remember any conversations that could have been twisted into criticism. Marcus, I helped her research flower options when she was worried about the budget. I asked about the venue capacity because she was stressed about fitting everyone. I asked about the church ceremony because she mentioned being nervous about having a religious service when she's not particularly religious. That's not how she interpreted it. Then why didn't you ask me directly? Why didn't you call me and say there was a problem? I'm your sister, Marcus. We've been close our entire lives. How could you believe I would sabotage your wedding? Marcus looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair and avoiding eye contact. Sarah was really upset. She cried for hours after some of your conversations. She said you made her feel like she couldn't make any decisions without your approval. So you decided the solution was to exclude me completely? To let me find out about your wedding after it was over? We thought you'd figure it out when you didn't get updated information. We thought you'd realize you weren't welcome anymore. The cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. You thought I'd realize I wasn't welcome. Marcus, I'm your sister. I should always be welcome at your wedding. The fact that your wife made me unwelcome should have been a problem you solved, not a reason to exclude me. Sarah is my wife now. I have to put her first. Putting her first doesn't mean sacrificing your relationship with your family. It means finding solutions that work for everyone. Our argument escalated from there, with Marcus defending every decision while our parents sat silently, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to take sides. The brother I'd grown up with, the man I'd supported through every major life decision, looked at me with the eyes of a stranger. You know what, Janet? Maybe this is better. Maybe it's time you learn that the world doesn't revolve around you. Sarah wasn't the first person to notice that you like to be the center of attention. The center of attention? Marcus, I've spent my entire life supporting you. I helped you through college when you struggled with math. I listened to you complain about every girlfriend before Sarah. I celebrated every promotion, every achievement, every milestone in your life. And you made sure everyone knew how much you were helping. You made sure everyone saw how supportive you were being. The accusation stung because it felt so unfair. Yes, I was proud of being a good sister. Yes, I wanted my family to know that I cared about them. But I'd never done anything for recognition. I'd helped because I loved him. I can't believe you're rewriting our entire relationship to justify excluding me from your wedding. I'm not rewriting anything. I'm finally being honest about patterns that have been going on for years. I left my parents' house that day feeling like I'd lost my entire family in one conversation. The brother I'd adored my whole life had revealed that he saw me as attention-seeking and controlling. My parents had shown that they valued keeping peace over protecting me. The family I'd built my identity around had demonstrated that I was expendable when it became convenient. The first few weeks were the darkest period of my adult life. I called in sick to work and spent days in my apartment, replaying every family interaction from the past few years, wondering if I'd been blind to resentment that had been building for a long time. I questioned everything about myself, wondering if I really was the person they'd described. Sleep became elusive. I'd lie awake at night remembering moments when I thought I was being helpful, wondering if my family had seen those moments as interference. Had I really been controlling without realizing it? Had my enthusiasm for family events been perceived as attention-seeking behavior? I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Martinez, a woman in her 50s who specialized in family dynamics and trauma. During our first session, I laid out the entire story, convinced that she'd help me understand what I'd done wrong and how to fix it. Instead, Dr. Martinez asked questions that had never occurred to me. Janet, in a healthy family system, when someone has a concern about a family member's behavior, how should that concern be addressed? They should talk to the person directly. Right, and if there's a misunderstanding about intentions, what's the appropriate way to handle that? Have a conversation to clear it up? Exactly. So when Sarah felt that your helpful suggestions were actually criticism, what should have happened? The answer was obvious. Someone should have talked to me. Sarah could have said directly that she felt overwhelmed by suggestions and needed space to make decisions independently. Marcus could have facilitated a conversation between us. My parents could have mediated if there was genuine conflict. Instead, the family had chosen to exclude me entirely, rather than address any alleged problems. They'd allowed Sarah to interpret my behavior in the worst possible light, without ever giving me a chance to explain my intentions or modify my approach. This suggests a pattern called scapegoating, Dr. Martinez explained. When a family system is uncomfortable with conflict or difficult emotions, sometimes they'll focus all the blame on one person rather than addressing the real underlying issues. Over the following months, I began to see my family dynamics more clearly. My role had always been the fixer, the helper, the one who took responsibility for everyone else's happiness. When Marcus struggled in college, I tutored him and helped him stay motivated. When my parents fought about money, I helped them create a budget. When extended family members had conflicts, I often served as the mediator. But that helper role had also made me a convenient target when things went wrong. If Marcus was stressed about wedding planning, it was easier to blame my suggestions than to acknowledge that wedding planning is inherently stressful. If Sarah felt overwhelmed by decisions, it was simpler to cast me as controlling than to develop better communication skills. I started building a life that didn't revolve around my family's needs and approval. I joined a hiking group and made friends who knew me independent of my family history. I focused on advancing my career, taking on challenging projects that pushed me professionally. I started dating again, something I'd put on hold while helping with wedding planning. The months of no contact were painful but also liberating. I discovered that I didn't need my family's approval to feel good about myself. I could make decisions based on my own values and preferences, rather than constantly considering how my choices would affect family dynamics. I bought my own house, a small craftsman bungalow with a garden where I could spend weekend mornings drinking coffee and reading. I adopted a rescue dog named Charlie, who became my faithful companion. I built holiday traditions that brought me joy rather than obligation. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was living for myself, rather than for other people's expectations. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, exactly 1 month after Marcus's wedding. I was at work, reviewing campaign materials for a new client, when my phone rang with Beverly's number. "Janet, honey, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll hear me out." "What is it, Beverly?" Marcus and Sarah are in a bind. Their honeymoon resort in Hawaii had to cancel their trip because of flooding from a storm. They'd planned to spend 2 weeks there, but now they're stuck with no place to go and non-refundable time off from work. I waited, sensing where this conversation was heading. They were wondering if they could use the lake house for their honeymoon instead. "I know things have been difficult between you all, but they're really desperate, and it would mean so much to Marcus." The lake house. The property that had been left to Marcus and me jointly in our grandfather's will. The place where Marcus had proposed to Sarah, where our family had spent countless summers, where I'd planned to retreat and heal after everything that had happened. "Beverly, they excluded me from their wedding. They let me find out after the fact that my own brother got married. And now they want a favor?" "I know, honey. I know it's a lot to ask. But Marcus called me crying yesterday. Sarah is devastated about their ruined honeymoon, and they don't have money for an alternative trip. They have money for a Hawaiian honeymoon, but not for any alternative? The resort was a wedding gift from Sarah's parents. They can't afford anything else right now." I felt a familiar tug of family loyalty, the same instinct that had led me to spend countless hours helping with wedding planning, even when my own needs went unmet. But I also felt something new, a protective instinct for my own emotional well-being. "I need to think about it." "Of course, honey. But they're hoping to leave this weekend if possible." Over the next few days, my phone rang constantly. My mother called to explain how disappointed Marcus was about his ruined honeymoon. My father called to remind me that family members help each other in times of need. Even cousins I barely spoke to reached out to tell me that letting Marcus use the lake house would be the right thing to do. Marcus himself finally called on Thursday evening. "Janet, I know we left things badly, but I'm really hoping you'll let us use the lake house. Sarah has been looking forward to this trip for months, and we don't have any other options." "Marcus, do you understand why I might be hesitant to do you a favor right now? Look, I know you're upset about the wedding thing, but that's in the past now. This is about our honeymoon." "The wedding thing? Marcus, you excluded me from your wedding and let me find out afterward. That's not a thing that's in the past. That's a fundamental betrayal that we haven't even begun to address. I thought you'd be over it by now. We all tried to reach you." "No, you didn't. You systematically excluded me, and then expected me to figure out I wasn't wanted anymore. Can we not relitigate this right now? We just need to know if we can use the lake house. His tone was exactly the same as it had been when he'd asked to borrow my car in college, or when he'd needed help moving apartments, or when he'd wanted me to cover his share of our parents' anniversary gift. He expected help without acknowledgement of wrongdoing, as if our relationship could return to normal without any real accountability. I need to see the property ownership documents before I make any decisions. Why? We both inherited it jointly. I want to understand exactly what my rights and responsibilities are. I spent Friday morning at my lawyer's office reviewing the terms of our grandfather's will. The property had indeed been left to both Marcus and me, with equal ownership and equal decision-making authority. But there was a clause I'd forgotten about. Either owner could make decisions about property use independently, but both owners had to agree to any permanent changes or sales. That meant I could legally prevent Marcus and Sarah from using the lake house, just as he could prevent me from using it if he chose to. Saturday morning, Sarah called me directly for the first time since before the wedding. Janet, I think we need to clear the air. I'm sorry if you felt left out of the wedding planning. That was never my intention. Sarah, I wasn't left out of wedding planning. I was excluded from the wedding entirely. Well, I just felt like there were some communication issues between us, and I thought it would be better to keep things simple. Communication issues like what? Just different ideas about how things should be done. Different styles. I recognized the non-apology immediately. Sarah was sorry I felt bad. Not sorry for what she'd done. She was characterizing the exclusion as a simple difference of opinion, rather than acknowledging that she'd orchestrated my removal from my brother's wedding. Sarah, if you felt we had communication issues, the appropriate response would have been to talk to me about it, not to exclude me from family events. I just didn't want any drama on my wedding day. There wouldn't have been any drama if you'd handled the situation like an adult. The conversation ended with Sarah in tears and me feeling like the villain, exactly as I suspected she'd planned. Within an hour, I received calls from both my parents, explaining how upset Sarah was and how I had ruined her week by being so harsh. The pattern was becoming crystal clear. Sarah created problems, everyone else accommodated her emotions, and I was expected to absorb the consequences without complaint. I made my decision Sunday morning while sitting in my garden with Charlie, watching the autumn leaves fall from the oak tree my grandfather had planted decades ago. The lake house represented family legacy, shared memories, and connections to people I'd loved deeply. But it also represented the place where Marcus had proposed to the woman who'd orchestrated my exclusion from their wedding. I called Marcus directly. I'll allow you to use the lake house for your honeymoon, but I have conditions. Conditions? Janet, it's our family property. Yes, it is. And as co-owner, I have the right to set conditions for its use. What kind of conditions? First, you and Sarah need to write me genuine apologies. Not explanations or justifications, but actual acknowledgments of what you did wrong and how it hurt me. Janet, we already said we were sorry that you felt left out. That's not an apology. That's you being sorry that I had feelings about your actions. I want you to acknowledge that excluding me was wrong, regardless of how I felt about it. Fine, what else? Second, when you return from your honeymoon, we're all going to family therapy. You, me, Sarah, and our parents. We're going to work through these family dynamics with a professional before they cause any more damage. Family therapy? Janet, that's ridiculous. We don't need therapy. The fact that you think it's ridiculous to get help communicating better as a family is exactly why we need therapy. Those are my conditions. Take them or find somewhere else for your honeymoon. And if we don't agree to therapy, then you don't use the lake house. Not this week, not ever. I'll exercise my legal rights as co-owner to prevent access. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You'd really keep us from using our family property? You'd really exclude your sister from your wedding? Apparently, we're both capable of making difficult decisions when we feel they're necessary. This is manipulation, Janet. No, Marcus. This is me setting boundaries and requiring accountability. If you want my cooperation, you need to demonstrate that you're willing to work on repairing the relationship you damaged. I need to talk to Sarah. Of course you do. The call I received 2 hours later came from my mother. Janet, honey, Marcus told me about your conditions. Don't you think you're being a little harsh? They've already apologized. They've explained why they think their actions were justified. That's not the same as apologizing. But family therapy? That seems extreme. What seems extreme to me is that my family thinks it's normal to exclude someone from a wedding without explanation, and then expect that person to provide favors without any accountability. We just want the family to get back to normal. Normal for this family apparently means that my feelings don't matter and my needs don't count. I'm not interested in getting back to that normal. But you're asking them to pay for therapy. I'm asking them to participate in therapy. I'll pay for it myself if cost is the issue. But if you all want to repair these relationships, you need to be willing to put in the work. That evening, I received a call from Sarah. Janet, Marcus and I have talked about your conditions. The apology thing is fine, but we really don't think we need therapy. Can't we just agree to communicate better going forward? Sarah, you spent months building a case against me behind my back and then excluded me from my brother's wedding. Then you told people I'd chosen not to participate. Those aren't communication problems. Those are serious character and integrity issues that need professional help to address. I think you're being really unfair. I think excluding someone from their brother's wedding without explanation is unfair. I think lying about the reasons is unfair. I think expecting favors after treating someone that way is unfair. So you won't let us use the lake house? Not without my conditions being met. Fine. We'll find somewhere else to go. But they didn't find somewhere else to go. Over the next few days, I learned from Beverly that Marcus and Sarah had spent their time off work at their apartment, both increasingly resentful that their honeymoon had been ruined. Sarah had apparently spent considerable time researching alternative vacation options, but everything was either too expensive or booked solid. Wednesday afternoon, Marcus called again. Janet, we'll do the therapy thing, but we want to set some ground rules. Such as, we're not going to sit there and be attacked for 2 hours. If the therapist just takes your side and blames us for everything, we're walking out. Marcus, therapy isn't about taking sides. It's about improving communication and understanding different perspectives. And we want to limit it to 3 sessions. We're not signing up for months of this. We'll go until the therapist thinks we've made sufficient progress. That might be 3 sessions, or it might be longer. And if we agree to this, you'll never bring up the wedding thing again? I paused, recognizing the same pattern I'd been seeing for months. Marcus wanted to control the terms of accountability, limit the consequences of his actions, and ensure that there would be no ongoing expectations for behavior change. I'll agree not to repeatedly rehash past events, but I won't agree to pretend they never happened. And if similar patterns emerge in the future, I'll absolutely address them. What do you mean, similar patterns? Excluding me from family events, making decisions about my life without consulting me, expecting favors while treating me poorly, that kind of thing. You're really going to hold this over our heads forever. I'm going to maintain boundaries that protect my emotional well-being. If you experience that as me holding something over your head, that probably says something about your expectations for how this relationship should work. Thursday morning, I received written apologies from both Marcus and Sarah. Marcus's apology was brief and grudging, acknowledging that excluding me from the wedding had hurt my feelings and expressing regret that things had gotten complicated. Sarah's apology was longer but followed a similar pattern, explaining her perspective extensively before offering a qualified acknowledgement that perhaps she could have handled things differently. Neither apology took full responsibility for their actions or acknowledged the depth of betrayal and hurt they'd caused. But they were steps in the right direction, evidence that both were capable of at least minimal accountability when consequences were involved. I called Dr. Martinez to ask for referrals to family therapists, explaining the situation and asking for someone who had experience with boundary issues and family scapegoating patterns. Friday afternoon, I called Marcus back. You can use the lake house next week. I've scheduled our first family therapy session for the week after you return. Dr. Sarah Chen has availability on Tuesday evenings, and I've already spoken with her about our situation. Thank you, Janet. Marcus? Yeah? I hope you and Sarah have a good time at the lake house. I hope you make happy memories there. But I also hope you understand that things between us have changed permanently. I'm not going back to the way our relationship used to work. What do you mean? I'm not going to absorb bad treatment silently anymore. I'm not going to prioritize everyone else's comfort over my own well-being. I'm not going to be the family member who gives endlessly while receiving nothing in return. Janet, that's not fair. We've always appreciated everything you've done for the family. Appreciation isn't the same as reciprocity, Marcus. And it's definitely not the same as basic respect. The months that followed were challenging, but ultimately transformative for our family relationships. The therapy sessions with Dr. Chen were difficult and sometimes painful, but they forced us to examine patterns that had been operating unconsciously for years. During our 3rd session, Dr. Chen asked my parents to describe their understanding of what had happened with the wedding exclusion. Their explanation revealed the depth of their conflict avoidance and their willingness to sacrifice my emotional well-being to prevent Sarah from being upset. We just didn't want Marcus to have to choose between his fiancée and his sister. my mother explained. But by not advocating for Janet's inclusion, you did make that choice for him, Dr. Chen pointed out. You chose Sarah's comfort over Janet's basic right to be included in her brother's wedding. We didn't see it that way at the time. How do you see it now? The question hung in the air for a long moment before my father spoke. I guess we were so focused on avoiding conflict that we created a bigger conflict. And what impact do you think that had on Janet? It probably made her feel like we didn't value her as much as we value Sarah. It was the first time either parent had acknowledged the message their actions had sent, and it felt like a small breakthrough. Sarah's participation in therapy was reluctant and defensive initially. She continued to frame the wedding exclusion as a misunderstanding rather than a deliberate choice, and she struggled to acknowledge the impact of her actions on me. I never meant to hurt Janet, she said during our 4th session. I was just trying to have the wedding I wanted without any stress or conflict. But excluding a family member is inherently creating stress and conflict, Dr. Chen observed. You didn't eliminate conflict, you just transferred it to Janet. I didn't think about it that way. What would it have looked like to address your concerns about Janet's involvement directly with her? Sarah admitted that she'd never considered having an honest conversation with me about feeling overwhelmed by suggestions or needing more space to make independent decisions. She'd assumed that any conversation would lead to conflict, so she'd chosen exclusion as the path of least resistance. Marcus's role in enabling Sarah's decision slowly became clearer through our sessions. His conflict avoidance was even stronger than our parents', and he'd been willing to sacrifice our sibling relationship rather than advocate for my inclusion if it meant potential tension with Sarah. I just wanted everyone to be happy, he said during our 6th session. But everyone wasn't happy, I pointed out. I was devastated. I felt betrayed by my entire family. The only way everyone could be happy was if my feelings didn't count. I didn't mean it that way, but that was the practical effect of your choices. The turning point came during our 8th session, when Dr. Chen asked each family member to describe their vision for healthy family relationships going forward. My parents spoke about wanting to be more direct in their communication and more willing to address conflicts before they escalated. Sarah talked about learning to express her needs clearly, rather than expecting others to guess what she wanted. Marcus acknowledged that he needed to develop better skills for managing competing loyalties and standing up for family members when necessary. When it was my turn, I talked about wanting relationships based on mutual respect and reciprocity, where my emotional well-being was valued equally with everyone else's, and where conflicts were addressed through communication rather than exclusion. I want to be able to trust that even when we disagree or have conflicts, we'll work through them together rather than writing each other off, I said. And what would that look like practically? Dr. Chen asked. It would look like people calling me directly when they have concerns rather than talking about me behind my back. It would look like including me in family decisions that affect me. It would look like valuing my perspective even when it's different from what others want to hear. Over the following months, we slowly began implementing these changes. Family gatherings became less tense as we developed better communication skills. My parents made more effort to include me in planning and decision-making. Sarah began asking directly for what she needed rather than expecting others to intuit her preferences. Marcus and I rebuilt our relationship gradually, with both of us working to understand how our childhood roles had evolved into unhealthy adult patterns. He began standing up for family members when others criticized them, and I worked on offering support without taking responsibility for everyone else's happiness. The lake house became a symbol of our family's healing process. We established a shared calendar for property use, with clear communication about scheduling and maintenance responsibilities. Sarah and Marcus's honeymoon there had apparently been peaceful and restorative, which I was genuinely glad to hear. But the most significant change was in my own relationship with my family identity. I stopped defining myself primarily as the helper, the fixer, the one who held everyone together. I began setting boundaries around my time and energy, saying no to requests that didn't align with my values or priorities. I also stopped trying to earn love and acceptance through endless giving. I learned to value relationships where care and support flowed in both directions, where my needs were considered alongside everyone else's. The family dynamics that had once felt immutable began to shift in healthier directions. Conflicts were addressed more directly and resolved more quickly. Family members took responsibility for their own emotions, rather than expecting others to manage their feelings. Most importantly, no one person bore sole responsibility for maintaining family harmony. Looking back on that devastating phone call with Aunt Beverly, I can see it as the catalyst for changes that ultimately strengthened our family relationships. The exclusion from Marcus's wedding was painful and wrong, but it forced us to examine patterns that had been causing damage for years. I learned that standing up for myself didn't destroy my family relationships. Setting boundaries didn't make me selfish. Requiring accountability didn't make me vindictive. Instead, these actions created space for more authentic and respectful connections. The brother who had excluded me from his wedding became someone who actively supported my goals and celebrated my achievements. The parents who had prioritized conflict avoidance learned to advocate for all their children equally. The sister-in-law who had orchestrated my exclusion developed skills for addressing concerns directly, rather than manipulating situations behind the scenes. We're not a perfect family, and we probably never will be. But we're a family that talks through problems, rather than around them. We're a family where everyone's emotional well-being matters. We're a family where love is demonstrated through respect and inclusion, rather than control and exclusion. If you've ever been scapegoated by your family or excluded from important events, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve relationships where your feelings matter, where your presence is valued, where conflicts are addressed through communication rather than exile. Setting boundaries with family members is difficult, especially when you've been trained to prioritize everyone else's comfort over your own well-being. But boundaries are what make healthy relationships possible. They're not walls that keep people out. They're guidelines that help people treat each other with respect. The day I found out about my brother's wedding was one of the worst days of my life. But it was also the beginning of my journey toward healthier family relationships and stronger self-advocacy. Sometimes the most painful experiences become catalysts for the most important growth. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Have you experienced being excluded from important family events? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar family challenges. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve relationships where your presence is celebrated, not merely tolerated. Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep advocating for the respect you deserve.